Behind the glamour, beyond the studio lights, there are stories the industry would rather bury 6 feet deep. In a town built on illusion, death should be just another fade to black. But what happens when the ending comes too suddenly, too violently, and the script no longer makes sense? Hollywood has always had a complicated relationship with mortality. Some stars burn out young, others vanish under a cloud of scandal, and a few are silenced in ways that seem too convenient. The official reports speak of suicides, accidents, overdoses, but behind those neat headlines lie tangled motives, missing files, and whispers no one dares to repeat. This is not a collection of tragic biographies. It is an autopsy of a machine that creates legends and occasionally destroys them. Each name you're about to hear was once lit up on marquees, their faces immortalized in celluloid. But off-screen, their final chapters were anything but glamorous. Why did a rising star drown in calm waters with no witnesses? Why did a beloved icon fall from grace and vanish into a lonely death? And why do some studio insiders still refuse to talk? Tonight, we don't honor the legends. We exhume them. 1. Ramon Novarro, the idol beaten in silence. He was the Latin lover who once rivaled Valentino. Ramon Novarro, dashing, discreet, and dangerously famous. In the 1,920 seconds and 30 seconds, he was a studio darling, known for his roles in Ben-Hur and Scaramouche. But behind his poised smile, Novarro carried a secret that could destroy careers. He was gay in a time when even rumors meant ruin. In 1968, he was found dead in his Los Angeles home, beaten with a silver vibrator, suffocated with his own blood. The official story claimed a robbery gone wrong. The culprits? 2 young brothers he allegedly invited over. But that narrative raises more questions than it answers. Why was Novarro tortured for hours over a non-existent stash of money the attackers claimed to have heard about? Why did MGM immediately downplay the story? And why did some insiders suggest he was being blackmailed before his death? Was this an act of random violence? Or did Hollywood's closet have sharper teeth than anyone imagined? 2. Jayne Mansfield, the curse behind the curve. She was more than just a Marilyn Monroe clone. Jayne Mansfield was sharp, seductive, and fully aware of her image as Hollywood's blonde bombshell. But her life and death were anything but cartoonish. In 1967, Mansfield's car slammed into a truck at high speed. Her 3 children survived. She didn't. Newspapers whispered that she was decapitated. Photos of the scene fed the legend, but what most people don't know is that Jayne had deep ties to Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan. Some say she wore a cursed medallion that night. Others claim she was trying to escape a string of threats. The coroner's report offered a clean explanation: death by cranial trauma. But if that's all there was to it, why do surviving insiders still refer to her demise as the one that felt warned? When glamour meets the occult, what's real and what's ritual? 3. George Reeves, Superman's final shot. To the world, he was Superman. To those close to him, George Reeves was a man increasingly trapped by that identity. By 1959, he was out of work, aging out of the role, and spiraling into depression, or so the story goes. One summer night, Reeves was found in his bedroom, a bullet through his head. The police ruled it a suicide, but his mother insisted he was murdered. His fiancée changed her story multiple times, and strange inconsistencies piled up. No fingerprints on the gun, no powder burns, party guests downstairs who heard nothing. Whispers linked his death to an affair with the wife of MGM's Eddie Mannix, a man rumored to make problems disappear. If Reeves was silenced, was it personal or professional? For a man who played a bulletproof hero, his death came with far too many holes. 4. Sal Mineo, the star who never saw it coming. He was on his way back. Sal Mineo, once the tormented Plato in Rebel Without a Cause, had survived the child star curse and was launching a comeback in theater. He was no longer the boy next to James Dean. He was a man reclaiming relevance. In 1976, after a late-night rehearsal, Sal was parking his car just steps from his West Hollywood apartment. A single stab wound to the heart ended his life. Witnesses saw a shadow fleeing into the dark. Police chalked it up to a random mugging, and a drifter was eventually convicted. Case closed. But those who knew Sal weren't convinced. There was no sign of struggle, no valuables were taken, and the killer who'd never met him changed his confession multiple times. Mineo had been outspoken, openly gay, and unafraid of stirring the pot in an industry that preferred silence. Was it a chance encounter gone wrong, or did someone want Sal silenced before his second act? 5. Jean Seberg, the actress watched to death. She had the face of a European angel and the politics of a revolutionary. Jean Seberg wasn't just an actress, she was a symbol. After Breathless made her an icon of the French New Wave, she used her fame to support the Black Panthers and civil rights movements. That made her a target. In 1979, Seberg was found dead in her car in Paris, surrounded by pills and wrapped in a blanket. Official cause: suicide. But documents declassified years later told a darker story. The FBI had waged a smear campaign against her, planting fake stories in the press about an illegitimate pregnancy to humiliate her. Friends claimed she was followed, phones tapped, letters intercepted. One director even claimed she spoke of being erased. If a studio can reshape your image, can a government erase your legacy? 6. William Holden, the Golden Boy's lonely end. He was the classic Hollywood man's man, gruff, charming, effortlessly cool. William Holden had it all: Oscars, leading roles, and a reputation for being brutally honest. But in his later years, that same honesty morphed into bitter isolation. In 1981, Holden bled to death alone in his Santa Monica apartment after falling and hitting his head on a nightstand. Days passed before anyone noticed. When they did, it was already too late. Some reports say he was drunk, others claim medication blurred his balance. But the detail that haunts most people: he wrapped his wound in tissues and tried to help himself, crawling toward the phone, but never made it. This wasn't a fiery crash or a mysterious shooting. It was slower, quieter, and perhaps more damning. How does a man so iconic die in silence, unnoticed for days? Maybe Hollywood doesn't forget its stars. Maybe it just stops checking in. 7. Natalie Wood, the drowning no one can explain. She was Hollywood royalty, the face of innocence and miracle on 34th Street and tragic beauty in West Side Story. But Natalie Wood's final role wasn't on screen. It was in a real-life mystery that still casts shadows. In 1981, Wood drowned off the coast of Catalina Island during a weekend boat trip with her husband Robert Wagner and co-star Christopher Walken. The story was neat: a drunken accident, a misstep, a fall into dark waters. But it didn't hold. Witnesses on nearby boats heard screaming. The dinghy she supposedly tried to board was untied but showed no signs of use. Wagner's account changed over time. Bruises were found on her arms and legs, and the captain of the boat later alleged a heated argument had taken place that night. The case was reopened in 2011. Wagner became a person of interest, but no charges were filed. When silence is louder than truth, who protects whom? 8. Marilyn Monroe, the icon who knew too much. She was the dream every man chased and the woman no one truly knew. Marilyn Monroe's death in 1962 was ruled a suicide, an overdose of barbiturates in her Los Angeles home. But the facts don't line up, and the theories refused to die. Phone records were missing. Her room was reportedly cleaned before police arrived. The diary she kept filled with references to high-level figures disappeared. And then there's the Kennedy connection. Both John and Robert were linked to her romantically. Some say she was about to go public. Others claim she was silenced before she could. One investigator later said, "The only thing we know for sure is that she didn't die alone, but no one else was ever named. Was it depression or a decision made for her?" 9. Brandon Lee, the bullet that wasn't a prop. He was set to become a star in his own right. Brandon Lee, son of Bruce Lee, was filming The Crow, a dark, stylized revenge film, when a stunt went fatally wrong. A prop gun, meant to be safe, discharged a real bullet into his abdomen. He died hours later. But how does a real bullet end up in a prop gun? Why weren't safety checks thorough? And why did the studio push to finish the film so quickly afterward? Brandon's father had also died young amid strange circumstances. Both had spoken about death, fate, and unfinished work. Fans began whispering of a curse. But some looked deeper, into budget cuts, negligence, and insurance loopholes. Was it coincidence or carelessness masked as tragedy? 10. Judy Garland, the voice that Hollywood wore down. She sang about rainbows, but lived under a storm. Judy Garland, beloved as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, spent her life caught in a brutal tug-of-war between talent and torment. MGM signed her as a teenager, then controlled every calorie, pill, and breath she took. By the time she died in 1969, officially from an overdose of barbiturates, her body was a record of decades-long pharmaceutical dependence. The pills weren't recreational. They were prescribed by studio doctors to keep her thin, awake, and compliant. Friends said she hadn't been suicidal. She had just married again, had new projects lined up, but her body had been pushed past its limit. The coroner called it accidental. Others called it inevitable. How many stars died not by choice, but by contract? 11. Thelma Todd, the smile frozen in a garage. They called her the ice cream blonde. Thelma Todd was a comedic star in the 1930 seconds who never quite fit the mold of silent damsel or scheming vamp. She was sharp, driven, and opening her own cafe on the Sunset Strip. In 1935, her body was found slumped in a garage, dead from carbon monoxide poisoning. The verdict: accidental death. But the scene was messy. Her shoes were clean despite the rainy weather. She had bruises on her face, and she was last seen arguing with her lover who had mob ties. Studio executives urged the press to move on. LAPD closed the case, but Hollywood insiders still ask, did she step into the garage or was she carried? And who benefits when a woman with too much ambition suddenly goes quiet? 12. Carol Landis, a scandal too inconvenient. She had beauty, charm, and a tragic sense of timing. Carol Landis was poised for greatness when she began an affair with actor Rex Harrison, who was very much married. In 1948, after a romantic weekend that ended with rejection, she was found dead in her home from an overdose of sleeping pills. The scandal? Harrison discovered her body and waited hours before calling a doctor. The studio spun the story as a heartbroken suicide, but Landis had left a note, one that vanished. Rumors spread that she had threatened to go public with the affair. Some say she was silenced to protect a rising star and a studio already battling other cover-ups. Was it heartbreak that killed her or Hollywood damage control? 13. Peg Entwistle, the girl who jumped from a dream. Before she became a cautionary tale, Peg Entwistle was a classically trained actress with Broadway promise. Hollywood lured her west with a film contract and the glitter of eternal fame. But the roles didn't come. The phone stopped ringing, and in 1932, she climbed 50 feet up the H of the iconic Hollywoodland sign and jumped. Her body was found days later. In her purse, a rejection letter from a studio. A few days after her death, she received a letter offering her a role, playing a woman who dies by suicide. It's the perfect Hollywood tragedy, but those who knew her spoke of depression far deeper than a lost role. A broken family, a failed marriage, and a city that promised everything, then gave nothing. Was her fall the product of rejection or a system designed to discard? 14. Dorothy Dandridge, the star the system broke. She broke barriers as the first black woman nominated for a Best Actress Oscar. But Dorothy Dandridge's rise came with a ceiling built from racism, tokenism, and backroom deals. She was praised publicly, but banned from hotels. Cast as the exotic temptress, then shunned for being too outspoken. In 1965, she was found dead in her Los Angeles apartment. The cause? Acute drug intoxication. But the dosage was low. Too low to kill someone unless their body had been weakened, and Dorothy had been struggling, financially ruined, mentally exhausted, left without roles or protection. There were signs of trauma, conflicting reports, a management team that disappeared when she died. To this day, some believe she was slowly dismantled by the industry she helped modernize. When history celebrates the breakthrough, does it bury the breakdown? 15. Brian Keith, the bullet after the grief. He was the gruff, lovable father figure in Family Affair and a fixture of 60 Seconds television. Brian Keith played men of strength, quiet humor, and resilience. But real life didn't follow the script. In 1997, just weeks after his daughter's suicide from cancer-related depression, Keith was found dead in his Malibu home, gunshot wound to the head, ruled a suicide. He left no note, no warning. Only the silence of grief and the question of whether one tragedy triggered another. Friends say he had been deeply shaken, but not hopeless. Others suggest the pressures of aging out of Hollywood, financial losses, and chronic illness may have piled on. Was it sorrow, coincidence, or the final act of a man who'd run out of lines? C's. Lupe Velez, the beautiful suicide no one believes. They called her the Mexican Spitfire. Lupe Velez was a force bold, brilliant, and unafraid of Hollywood's double standards. She commanded the screen with comedic timing and explosive energy. But in 1944, at just 36, she was found dead in her home from a seconal overdose. The tabloids sensationalized her final moments, that she died with her head in a toilet, that her suicide was botched. The image was so grotesque it became legend. But it was a lie. The truth? Lupe had prepared everything carefully, clothes laid out, candles lit. She had written a heartfelt note. The ugly details were added later, possibly by studio insiders eager to discredit her. Why tarnish her legacy? Because she was pregnant out of wedlock. Because she wouldn't conform. Because she didn't go quietly. Hollywood didn't just rewrite her scripts, it rewrote her ending. 17. Karl Alfalfa, Switzer, a child star gunned down, over $50. As Alfalfa in Our Gang, Karl Switzer was America's favorite freckled troublemaker. But the mischief that made him famous didn't follow him into adulthood. He struggled for work, bounced between odd jobs, and drifted into debt. In 1959, Switzer was shot dead during an argument over a dog and a small loan, just $50. The shooter claimed self-defense and a jury agreed. But the story is murky. Switzer reportedly arrived unarmed, though angry. Witnesses were split. The man who pulled the trigger walked free. No one in Hollywood intervened. No studio mourned. No legacy campaign followed. Just a former child star, discarded and dead in someone else's home. How does a household name end up forgotten on the floor? 18. Elizabeth Short, the starlet who became a corpse icon. She never got her big break, but she became infamous in death. Elizabeth Short, dubbed the Black Dahlia, was found in a Los Angeles vacant lot in 1947. Her body mutilated, severed at the waist, posed grotesquely. She was 22. She had dreams of stardom, but few real credits. Her murder shocked the nation and Hollywood, which quickly tried to distance itself. Yet her associations with studio parties, low-level producers, and military men kept the whispers alive. Dozens of suspects emerged, surgeons, actors, even a former cop, but no one was charged. The case remains open. Some say the LAPD bungled the investigation. Others suggest it was covered up too close to too many powerful people. She died unknown, but became a cautionary tale carved into legend. Not for her talent, but for her silence. Who killed Elizabeth Short, and who ensured we'd never know? 19. Bob Crane, the private life that turned deadly. He was the charismatic face of Hogan's Heroes, a sitcom hit with a dark undercurrent. Bob Crane had the smile of a leading man, but off-camera, his life was consumed by sex addiction, home recordings, and strange company. In 1978, Crane was found bludgeoned to death in his Arizona apartment. The scene was gruesome. No forced entry, no witnesses. The prime suspect? John Carpenter, not the director, but a friend who helped set up Crane's video equipment to film his sexual encounters. Carpenter was tried decades later and acquitted. DNA was inconclusive. Motive was circumstantial. The case remains technically unsolved. Crane's downfall wasn't just violent, it was public. Hollywood pretended not to know, then used the scandal as moral distance. A man once beloved became a cautionary footnote, but was he punished by a killer or by a culture that had already decided his guilt? 20. Charles Rocket, the comedian who laughed last. He had charm, edge, and a future that once included Saturday Night Live, moonlighting, and steady film work. Charles Rocket was a satirical firebrand until one moment changed everything. In 1981, during a live SNL skit, he let an F-bomb slip. The network panicked. He was fired. His career never fully recovered. 2 decades later, in 2005, Rocket was found in a field near his Connecticut home. His throat had been slit. The ruling? Suicide. But friends were baffled. He had just been cast in a new show. He left no note. The wound was clean, deep, and precise, unusual for self-inflicted injuries. There was no weapon found nearby. Authorities insisted the case was closed. But skeptics wondered, was Rocket's outspokenness his undoing, or was the joke simply on him in the cruelest possible way? In Hollywood, when a voice goes silent, who decides whether it was a whisper or a scream? Bonus fact, Albert Decker. The death that defied explanation. He played mad scientists, corrupt politicians, and men unraveling at the edges. Albert Decker's career spanned decades of prestige and precision, but in 1968, it ended in a scene too twisted for even the darkest noir. Decker was found in his Hollywood home nude, kneeling in a bathtub, blindfolded, gagged, handcuffed. Hypodermic needles pierced his arm. In lipstick, words were scrawled across his chest and stomach. Profane, cryptic, humiliating. The official ruling? Accidental death from autoerotic asphyxiation. But no fingerprints were lifted, no signs of forced entry, and Decker's fiancée, who discovered him, swore the scene had been arranged. Some speculated it was a robbery turned grotesque. Others whispered it was a hit, masked in spectacle. Decker had just returned to acting. He had political ambitions, had criticized McCarthyism, and reportedly crossed certain lines in Washington. Was this a misadventure or a message? In Hollywood, image is everything, but sometimes the cover story is the real performance. They say death is the great equalizer, but in Hollywood, even the end comes with a script. Some stories are tragic, others are suspicious, and a few, are so meticulously rewritten, the truth may be buried forever. Which death felt like an accident? Which one read like a cover-up? And most of all, if the cameras hadn't stopped rolling, what might we have seen? Tell us which story unsettled you the most. And do you think these stars were simply unlucky or erased?